On behalf of the Greek Ministry of Culture and Sports and the Effort of Antiquities of Eastern Attica, we would like to thank you for the invitation to participate in the present conference in order to speak about the battlefield of Marathon. There, in 490 BC, 10,000 Athenians and their 1,000 allies from the city of Plataea fought and defeated the army of the mighty Persian Empire. The battle was the culmination of the first attempt by Persia under King Darius I to subjugate Greece. At that time, the Persian Empire covered most of the Southwest Asia, reaching as far as the easternmost boundaries of Europe. The Persian army, 30,000 strong, despite the exaggerations of historiographers, under the leadership of Datis and Artaphernes, reached the coast of Marathon and encamped on the southern edge of the big marshes. The coastal plain of Marathon, approximately 40 kilometers northeast of Athens, was an ideal bridgehead, a long, flat coastline suitable for disembarkation and abundant water and crops to sustain the troops. On hearing news of the Persian landing at Marathon, the Athenians decided to confront the enemy invaders on the spot. They encamped in the sanctuary of Heracles, to the north of the small marsh, thus blocking the narrow coastal path to Athens. Their force was 10,000 men, to whom 1,000 from the city of Plataea in Boeotia were added. Spartans, who had promised to send aid as soon as a religious festival was over, arrived late, a day after the battle. The Athenian Miltiades, in agreement with the Polemarch Callimachos, took command of the operations. Battle commenced in the morning of 11th or 13th September of 490 BC. It is not certain whether the enemy forces were aligned parallel or perpendicular to the coast and how far inland. It is most likely that the Persian army lined up northeast of the spot where the tumulus now stands, at a distance 1.5 kilometers from the Greeks. To meet the larger invading force, Miltiades weakened his center and reinforced his wings, hoping that his hoplites could hold the middle, while the flanks broke through the Persian infantry. The Athenians made the first move, running swiftly for the last 150 meters so as to escape the Persian arrows. In fact, the Athenian center broke, but it held long enough for the Athenians to rout the Persian wings and then surround the center, causing a general panic among the invaders. During the retreat to their ships, many of the Persians lost their way and were drowned in the big marshes. Almost 6,400 Persians fell in battle. The rest of the Persian force sailed for Phaleron, but they did not come ashore since the victorious Athenian army had already arrived. Landmark of the Great Battle of Marathon is the large mound of earth called Soros, 9 meters high and 50 meters in diameter, raised on the spot where the clash reached its climax, over the 192 Athenian dead in this historic battle. The dead must have been cremated separately or in 10 pyres, according to the 10 tribes of Athens. When the pyres had died down, the relatives gathered the remains of the corpses and deposited them on the site of the tumulus, together with vases as funerary offerings. Earth was heaped upon them, creating the knoll we see today. Stele inscribed with the victims' names, arranged by tribe, were erected on the top of the mount. According to Herodotus, at another spot in the plain, the Plataean dead were buried. The Plataean tumulus, smaller at around 3 meters, was identified and excavated in 1970 by Spiridon Marinatos, 3 kilometers west of the tumulus of the Athenians at Vranas, in the area where the Archaeological Museum of Marathon has been set up. 11 burials were revealed. 10 were of adult males, and 1 was of a boy 10 years, probably a messenger, as Marinatos assumed. Over the burials, vases had been deposited as grave goods, and a tumulus composed entirely of river pebbles was raised. There is a dispute about the identification of the tumulus of the Plataeans because of its distance from that of the Athenians and because of the variety of burial practices, cremations, and inhumations. Some years after the battle, the Athenians set up a trophy to commemorate their victory at the spot where the Persians were finally defeated and buried in a massive grave at the edge of the big marsh. Parts of this trophy were incorporated in the medieval tower close to the Church of the Virgin Mesosporitissa. The trophy is in the form of a smooth column shaft 10 meters high with Ionic capital. On its upper surface, it supported a statue, probably depicting the goddess Nike, victory, as a young dressed human with wings. The victory at Marathon inspired confidence throughout the Greeks and averted the danger of the comeback of tyranny in Athens. It also designated Athens as a new powerful state after Sparta, while the Marathon warrior became the immortal model of the freedom fighter. There were many memorials to the battle, most of which made at the days of Cimon, Miltiades' son, echoing the message of the victory. From the spoils of the battle, the Athenians constructed in the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi the so-called Athenian treasury. On the Acropolis of Athens, the bronze statue of Athena Promachos, a great work of Phidias, is said to have been made from the booty of the battle. Another statue, that of Iris, the messenger of the gods, was also set up on the Acropolis in memory of the polemarch Callimachos, who fell in battle. In 460 BC, the battle was depicted in a large mural in the Poikile Stoa in the Agora of Athens. Besides, the frieze of the temple of Athena Nike on the Acropolis of Athens contained a cavalry scene from the Battle of Marathon. Into Roman times, the tumulus remained a place of pilgrimage for Athenian youths. Pausanias, writing his impressions of the site almost 6 centuries later, says, "At Marathon, every night you can hear horse neighing and men fighting." The battlefield of Marathon has attracted for centuries travelers and tourists, pilgrims of the glorious battlefield or researchers. From the late 18th and throughout the 19th century, the interest of for the location of the battlefield of Marathon increased, as did the number of travelers to Greece. Most of them were wealthy young men who decided to make a trip around Europe called the Grand Tour. Product of those visits were various and innumerable descriptions and images and books, giving us valuable information about the region. The traveler Edward Clark visits Marathon and locates the tumulus of the Athenians and the trophy near the Church of the Virgin Mesosporitissa. Lord and Lady Elgin attempted to excavate the Soros, but mostly they searched for weapons following the collective frenzy for Marathon memorabilia. Robert Walpole gives us a full description of the battlefield. At a point he comments, "At this day may be seen towards the middle of the plain a large tumulus of earth, 25 feet in height, resembling those on the plain of Troy." The archaeologist and painter Edward Dodwell made the first etching of the tumulus. At that time, it had already been excavated by Louis Fauvel, who, as an ambassador of France in Athens, tried unsuccessfully to excavate the tumulus. William Leake, guided by the text of Pausanias, visits the tumulus and gets impressed by the great number of the arrowheads scattered on the region. By 1836, there was such a demand for Marathon memorabilia that the unauthorized excavations in the plain got significantly out of hand. On 12 May 1836, the Greek government prohibits any unauthorized excavation. The English philosopher John Stuart Mill declares, "The Battle of Marathon, even as an event in British history, is more important than the Battle of Hastings. If the issue of that day had been different, the Britons and the Saxons might still have been wandering in the woods." The British poet Lord George Gordon Byron dedicated his poetry as well as his life to the Greek fight for liberation from the Turkish occupation. In his poem, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, he reminisces about the victory of Marathon as he gazes the battlefield. The German officer Hauptmann von Essenberg visited the battlefield of Marathon and discovered huge masses of human bones. The absence of a funeral monument led him to the suggestion that they belonged to the deceased Persians. Heinrich Schliemann was the first excavator of the tumulus in 1884. Due to the weather conditions, he soon abandoned the excavation, concluding that the tumulus was a cenotaph of the 9th century BC. The final investigation was carried out by Valerius Stais in 1890. He revealed a thick layer of ash, charred skeletal remains, and fragments of vases as votive offerings to the dead warriors. He also found a pit where the remains of funerary banquets were deposited. All these findings are kept today in the Archaeological Museum at Marathon and the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Older and recent views that the tumulus of Marathon did not belong to the Athenians killed in the battle are refuted on the basis of excavation data. After the battle, an Athenian messenger was sent from Marathon to Athens, a distance of about 42 kilometers, and on reaching the city, just managed to say, "We are victorious," before dying of exhaustion. In remembrance of the legendary feat of the Athenian hoplite, the French professor Michel Brel established the marathon race in the modern Olympic Games, first held in Athens in 1896. A Greek, Spiros Louis, was the first victor in this event. Apart from the Olympic Games, more than 800 marathon runs are held throughout the world each year, with the larger marathons having tens of thousands of participants. The classic marathon run is held every year in November, from Marathon to Athens, finishing at the Panathinaik Olympic Stadium. The day prior to the race, the marathon flame is lit during a special international ceremony that takes place inside the archaeological site of the tumulus of the Athenians. Although information about the legendary marathon runner and his name is scant, the Marathon Road is a globally recognizable landmark. Nowadays, the Greek Ministry of Culture and the Ephorate of Antiquities of Eastern Attica, abiding the Greek constitution and the law on the protection of antiquities, cares for the location, research, preservation, protection and promotion of the antiquities, as well as the administration of the museums and the archaeological sites. In the case of Marathon, the Archaeological Service, in an attempt to protect the battlefield and the monuments revealed, has denoted since 1963 extensive areas as archaeological sites. Within its limits, any work or activity can be applied only after obtaining the approval of the Minister of Culture. Furthermore, parts of the battlefield, as well as the immediate surroundings of important monuments, have been expropriated and developed to organized archaeological sites. In 2004, on the occasion of the Olympic Games in Athens, improvement works were carried out at the sites of Marathon. In the tumulus of the Athenians, the new pathway for visitors encircles the tumulus and includes vantage points for viewing the monument and its surroundings. In a specially arranged place, there are information panels with texts related to the battle, while the topography of the wider region is presented in a scale model of the plain, on which the archaeological sites of Marathon are marked. Moreover, at the archaeological site of the trophy, the column has been reconstructed of marble in the location where it was probably set up. The Archaeological Museum of Marathon, built in 1975 and renovated in 2004, houses antiquities from excavations in the wider region, dating from the prehistoric times until the late antiquity. In one showcase, there are exhibited finds from the tumulus of the Athenians. Most of the vases are black figure, dated in the years around the battle. The most striking of these are a globular vase, which contained the bones of a general, perhaps Callimachos or Stesileos, and a black figure Hydria, with a Dionysian scene, as well as some Lycithi and Alecanis. Exhibited in the museum are also the finds from the tumulus of the Plataeans, such as black figure vases, plates, a black figure Lutrophoros, etc. Last but not least, the surviving parts of the victory trophy are placed in the central gallery. 2 drums of a marble column about 10 meters high and its Ionic capital, on top of which a statue of the goddess Victory once stood. Additionally, the municipality of Marathon runs the Marathon Run Museum, where the history of marathon race is recorded from 1896 until today, through a collection of rare objects and thematic sections. In 2010, in commemoration of the 2500th anniversary of the marathon battle, a number of events and activities were organized in Athens and in Marathon. A special flame lighting ceremony took place at the site of the tomb of the Athenians. That year's marathon run was also dedicated to the memory of the great scientist and politician Gregory Labrakis and the pacifist movement of his time, which organized in 1963 the first pacifist rally from Marathon to Athens. In the framework of that anniversary, the Greek Archaeological Service designed an educational program related to the famous battle. In collaboration with our colleague, Mrs. Peli Fotiadi, we have been running this program for 8 years, directed to students between 9 to 16 years old, with the aim to teach them the magnitude of this battle. A battle with which the Greeks won the first European victory against Asia, stemming the tide of despotism and creating the preconditions for an unrivaled development of democracy and civilization. I conclude translating the words of the great philosopher Plato. By the victory which the Marathon warriors gained over the barbarians, first taught other men that the power of the Persian was not invisible, but that hosts of men and the multitude of riches alike yield to valor. And I assert that those men are the fathers not only of ourselves, but of our liberties and of the liberties of all who are on the continent. Thank you.